Hello, I'm Demis Hellen, and this is episode number 2 of the Minimal Techno series, where we're going to be focusing on the sound design. So in this video, we're going to talk about sound design. We're going to talk about sound design within the synth, and then we're going to talk about sound design in the effects chains as well, how we can utilize both together and understand how we're going to process it later on so the sound doesn't have to be over-engineered in the synth itself. So we're going to start with the bass, and you can see from this bass that we have 3 layers. Now, usually you can just have one bass and that works sufficiently, but I like to split my basses up so I have a bit more control. So we've got sort of like the main tone of the bass here with the grunge, then we've got the low square which provides the weight and the warmth of the sound, and then we've got presence which just adds a little bit extra to the top end of the bass, so it just cuts through the mix more. So this is optional, but this is a good way to do it as well if you want to understand your basses more. So starting with the grunge bass, there's 2 elements to this one. There is the VST bass amp. So I'm going to turn this off in the inserts down here on the left, and I'm going to jump up to the grunge bass and we're going to load Retrolog. So everything's designed in Retrolog in this track, and you can see we've got a very simple setup here. So oscillators 1 to 3 are all active. We've got a saw, a square, and a triangle. So this gives us a nice broad spectrum of sound in our bass design. The triangle is going to give nice low weight without too much audible top end. The square is going to give us some raw grit, and then the saw is going to give us the presence in there. So note that each one is in a fixed phase position. We want the bass to re-trigger, so every time we hit the bass note on the keyboard, it's going to hit in the same spot every time, and it's not going to sound like it's jumping around. It's going to be solid and straight to the point every time. And we've got this set to mono mode. We don't need any stereo information from here, and re-trigger is activated, so we're going to get a nice solid bass. So out of the box, that's all that's happening. There is no effects built into this one, and if we listen to this sound on its own without the VST bass amp, in fact, I'm going to mute the bass group as well. So you need to understand what you're going to try and do later on for the sound design to make sense. So you don't want to over-engineer at this stage, and you can hear you're probably going to have a bass like this and think it's not actually usable when it is. So with that, if we jump out, we can see the VST bass amp here. If I just drag this across, if you just load this in, straight off the bat, you're going to get this preset. I've just made a few tweaks to it, and I'll just explain them. I've just tweaked the EQ down here, but then over on the microphones, I've just biased it more toward the mic rather than the line. I think it's set at 50-50. And then the configuration is set to mono. I think it comes standard as stereo, but just double check that. And then on the master, I've just changed the EQ middle position to 8,000 kilohertz, or 8,000 hertz, sorry, instead of 1,000. I think it's more in the middle. And that's all I've done to that. And this is what you get. So it's not desirable for everybody, but when you couple that up with the low square, we start to get a very nice texture to the sound. So that is the first part. That's the sound design in terms of getting the tone set for the bass. I wanted something grungy, but with a lot of weight in there, and I couldn't achieve that from just one preset. So the second bass comes in, and we can see here that if we load this, we can see it's just a square. We've got the fixed phase position again and mono, so it's re-triggering in the same position every time, so we get a nice low end throughout the track. And then that's set up with some of the envelope shape in there with the filter, so you can copy that as well as the other preset on screen. That's what you see, and you'll have exactly the same sound, and there is no effects happening in this either. And pretty much this is in its raw form. We've got a frequency on here. It's just reducing some of the lows just to sort of tame the power a little bit, because it's a little bit too powerful. And then a compressor to give it a bit of snap as well. And that sounds like this. That's pretty much how it comes out of the box. And then finally, we've got the presence on here. Exactly the same preset as the square one, but we've rolled out more of the lows, and we're using it as a presence bass as well, so we get a bit more snap throughout the mix so we can hear it more. So that is, in terms of sound design, that is a quick way to get into the sound design, understanding that the more basic sounds are going to become the better sounds when they're mixed together. And you can hear how the square and those saws mixed together from both of those presets, along with that VST bass, gives it some real grunge, and it gives a unique bass to you. Someone else hasn't done that particular setup, and you've got more of a unique sound. So these are the things that you can think about. So jumping over to the mixer, we can turn on the bass group again. And I've gone through these settings in the previous video, so if you want to check them out, you can see them on there. And that just finalizes that sound design. So let's take a look at another part of the track. We're going to look at the bass hits. So back on the main screen, let's take a look at the bass hits, and we're going to look at these effects here that are happening. So some are samples, like the bass bomb and the bass hits here. These two are samples. It's just a very garagey style bass. And then I just add some Destroyer and Roomworks as the main two things on here. So distortion to give it presence, make it make sense in the track, and then we've got a short reverb time. So in terms of sound design, I tend to use a reverb, especially ones that are this well made, like the Roomworks SE, on a individual track level. So I won't just do a send with one. If I'm utilizing it in a generic way, then I will do that, but I do it on a track level so I can tailor the same reverb sound but for different instruments. So I want this to be darker, so we've got the high level turned down, we've got the reverb time turned down to a second, and the mix is quite low. Whereas, say, the next sound, let's just look at the next one, the bass bomb. We can see from this one, we've got a nearly 6-second reverb time, roughly the same, keeping it dark, but we've got a longer reverb in there, so it sort of like blends into the next section through that transition. So that's why I use them on an individual level, and it gives you more control over your sound design as well. So with that, if we look at something like the bass whop here, which is a preset from Retrolog, we can hear we just got that whip effect. This is using the multi-type, so we get access to the detuned voices. So we've got 5 on each, detuned on the saws, and then you can see that is the sound design I've done there, utilizing the amp attack and the decay to be sort of like quick to swell and quick to decay off, and you get that classic Boris Brazier style whop. On that, there is no effects again, everything is third party on here, or should we say Cubase built, but on the effects chain. And what we're doing is adding width to the sound, so you can see I'm using this stereo enhancer. So let's just hit the keys. So it's just giving it more width, whilst not compromising the mono compatibility there. We've got some ping pong delay to give it some space back and forth, left and right. And then we've got the EQ M5. Now this is where it comes into its own, because I've attenuated the mids but made the highs a bit crispy and retained some of the lows in there. So let's listen to it with it off. So that doesn't fit into the track, it just sits on the top and it sounds really out of place when the track's playing. It just sounds a little bit bland. So adding some weight and some clarity to the top, but whilst attenuating the mids, gives it a little bit of space, and it puts it in its own unique perspective in the track. It just gives it a different dimension. And then finally, just before we wrap this video up on the sound design, let's just take a look at this melody lead here. So I want to explain how we've got it sounding quite rough and rugged, and what we've done to make it fit. So Retrolog, we've got a single oscillator here, so it sounds like a detuned saw. So what we've done here is used a saw. I've done my shaping, so you can copy all of that. We've got a bit of white noise on the top. But then if we jump into the effects, you can see I've put on the modulator, and I've used the ensemble preset here, or the type. And then I've just turned up the rate to 3 Hertz. So you can see that this then oscillates though the modulation really fast, which gives you that detuned vibe. If we turn this off, so there's all different ways that we can achieve that really hard, gritty sounds that we hear in the minimal techno scene. So all in all, we get a lovely mix that sounds like this. And there we are, that brings us to the end of this video. Hopefully you've got some more insight into how to make minimal techno using Cubase stock plugins. And with that said, thank you very much for watching, and I will look forward to seeing you all in the next video. Take care.